Hello, my name is Mary Jo Fostin. I'll be bringing you interactive communication, the second in our webinar series, and I'm hoping that this can help you. I will be bringing 40 years of my past experience in helping couples, both engaged couples, married couples, and couples that just want to be together, as well as my marriage and family therapy business that I have. So I'm hoping it'll be helpful. In number 2 here, we will be doing just a short review. Those will be the red slides that you'll see. Then we'll have a number of blue slides. They will be on different types of communication, both destructive and constructive, listening and responding, attentive listening, especially for our electronic age, which seems to have more trouble with attentive listening, respectful assertiveness, that's my term for assertiveness, that's a positive way of doing it, conflict resolution steps, and a very important one, how to deal with very difficult people. Because somewhere in your life, you're going to come across a very difficult person. And we're going to be revisiting people A through D that we saw in our first series, and hopefully helping them to solve their problems in communication. So the first thing I want to help review is on boundaries. Boundaries tell us what we are willing to do, what we are not willing to do, and what we are willing to be responsible for. And that's in order to protect our own physical self from being taken advantage of by other people, because sometimes that happens. And the myths that we have that sometimes cause problems in setting boundaries are quite a few. So I've listed these here. Sometimes we don't want to hurt other people. We don't want them to think that we are selfish. We don't want to cause a big argument. We don't want to seem insensitive or mean. We don't want to be hurt by people. We don't want someone else to be angry with us. And there's a big one here, fear of not being loved or fear of being abandoned. So these are all things that keep us from setting boundaries. And they're myths that we tend to believe. And these are things that we can work on in therapy, work on in just ourselves to work against so that we can set appropriate boundaries for ourselves. And then there's certain categories that we tend to fall into if we have boundary problems. And they tend to be one of the 4 here: compliant, avoidant, controller, or non-responsive. Now, a compliant has pretty fuzzy boundaries, doesn't really know when to say yes or no. There's many fears of being hurt by other people or hurting other people, fear of abandonment. All of those seem to come together in a compliant person. And then there's the avoidant person who tends to withdraw. They tend to not recognize their own needs and therefore don't share what they need with other people. And then there's the controller who tends to not respect other people's needs. There's non-responsive people who don't tend to hear the needs of other people. Other people might say what they need, but they don't really care. And so they don't respond to them. So these are problems that cause a lot of problems in relationships. And how important it is to know your individual rights as a person. And these will help you as you work on setting boundaries, setting not only boundaries, but appropriate things that you want to say to people. And so how important it is to know that you have a right to think and feel differently than other people. You have a right to be yourself because we're all unique. You have a right to think differently, to do things differently, to disagree. Remember that. You have a right to disagree. You have a right to say no or yes or even maybe. Give me some time. You have a right to disengage from somebody else if they feel uncomfortable to you. You have a right to be silent. You have a right to take time to think, to ask for privacy, and to set boundaries for your own self-care. It's very important to know these individual rights that we all have so that you can use these in positive ways in what I would call respectful assertiveness. And the other thing that you might need to know to be willing to do respectful assertiveness properly and appropriately is to know your individual needs and wants, things that are really important to you. And these are all very common needs. Let's start at the top. The need to feel loved. Who doesn't need to feel loved? But have you ever had the experience where somebody tells you that they love you and you don't really feel loved by that person? So what's important here is that you need to feel loved, respected, appreciated. You need to feel heard, valued, worthwhile to someone else, capable in what you do. And all of us have a need to belong because we are social beings and we don't want to be alone. Totally, anyway. Sometimes we need alone time, but we don't want to be totally alone. So these are things that we can use in respectful assertiveness. And we'll be talking about that in future slides here. And so here's some of the new slides. I usually, when I have a couple who is in front of me in therapy and they're having trouble with communication, and by the way, that's the most common problem that people come in with is we have a communication problem. And so I always ask them, so what do you mean by that? And then I ask them to go down this list, 2 slides here. What do you tend to do? Stick with yourself. What do you tend to do that's destructive? So we'll go through the first slide. Do you tend to badger, intimidate, not only with your words, but maybe in the way you stand, the way you look? How are you coming off to that other person? Do you tend to be critical, judgmental, sarcastic? Do you not listen? Do you tend to blame or shame? And so I've listed some ways to change these to be constructive. Instead of badgering, can you ask politely? Instead of intimidating, can you use a respectful voice and posture and calm your face down to a softer person? Instead of being critical and judgmental, can you work on forgiving? Instead of being sarcastic, can you maybe even give a compliment? And we'll be going through listening attentively, respectful assertiveness. And so it's important to work on not being destructive yourself. All we can work on is our own self. Second slide. So look at the left-hand column. Do you do any of these? Name calling, swearing, exploding in anger, assuming the negative or the worst, overreacting or taking things personally? What do you do that causes communication problems? And so constructively, can you stop using name-calling words? Can you stop swearing? Use kinder words? How important it is to think about being kind to each other, even when you disagree, even when you're angry at that person, and to control your emotions, your own emotions. You can't control the other person's emotions, but you can and can learn to control your own emotion, to be objective instead of being negative, and stop assuming that you know what the other person is thinking or interrupting them and assuming that you know what they're going to say next, so that you react matter-of-factly, objectively, being willing even to hear criticism because maybe there's an ounce of truth in it. If there is, then we need to pay attention to that. Okay, important to be able to change our communication to be constructive so that it works well for the relationship. And here's what I term respectful assertiveness. I don't know why anybody didn't come up with this before, but this is my term. You have a right to express your thoughts. That's what we talked about in your knowing your rights. But respectful expression really helps other people to understand you. And people will listen to you more and more easily if you're respectful in the way you say it. Using I statements, you probably all heard of this. I'm going to help you try to make it less plastic. I feel concerned when you don't come home when you say you're going to, because I worry about you and I want to make sure you're okay. I want us to be able to talk because it's so important for me to communicate with you. I need you to be honest with me because honesty is so important to me. I'm concerned about, you fill in the blank. What are you concerned about? Share your concern as a concern, not as a blaming statement and a you better do this type of statement. I'm concerned about this. But prepare yourself for the other person's response because you don't know how they're going to respond. They may respond in anger, in sarcasm, they may get disappointed, sad, blaming, shaming, whatever they get. But you can't change that. If you, at the end of a conversation with somebody else, can tell yourself, well, at least I was respectful. At least I tried to use kind words, at least most of the time, then that's all you can do. And how important it is just to be able to keep trying. If you blow it one time, try again the next time and just keep trying. And you've all heard about attentive listening, but I'm going to help you try to bring it into our age. I see a lot of couples in therapy who do not look at each other when they're talking. They're talking on the phone, they're texting somebody else, and they're talking to some. My husband and I will get in little spats because my head's in the freezer, and as you all know, there's a background noise in the freezer, and he's in the next room, and I expect him to hear me when I'm talking into the freezer, okay? And he's saying, I can't hear you, and I'm saying, why can't you hear me? I'm speaking up. Okay, face each other. Get off the phone, get off the computer. Stop texting. Look at each other. Hopefully look at each other kindly. Be in the same room with undistracted attention and showing interest. You know, my funny story is that I can listen to people all day long, 8 hours a day, because I'm a therapist and that's what I do. And I try to be very empathetic to people. I turn to my husband and I kind of lose my focus. I'm starting to think about what I need to do during the day, getting dinner, getting some of the chores done. I forget my own attentive listening skills, but I need to remember them. I need to refocus. I need to refocus on him. I need to focus on what he's saying, not what I'm thinking. I might need to ask questions if I kind of lost my focus for a minute. Can you please say that again? Or did you just say that? And listening to try to understand the other person. Oftentimes we just listen. We just kind of blow the other person off a little bit. But are we really trying to understand what they are going through, what they are saying, what they're saying without words? How are they feeling? Can we listen to them without interrupting and without judging? We can, Are we willing to? And then once you do respond, are you willing to choose your words carefully? Are you willing to choose to have an attitude of respect for that other person? To choose your tone of voice so it's not sarcastic or short, but kind. That's your choice. To respond, to give information. This is how I feel. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think about that? So we can, even as we respond, we can ask a question of the other person to clarify their stance and use I statements. I feel this way. I'm thinking this way. This is what I need. This is what I want. To make requests, not demands. Asking for respect for yourself, saying that you are trying to give respect to them, but give some sort of response, even if it's a nod or an mm-hmm, but with interest. Okay, that's respect. Each one of us needs and deserves respect, even if we are being nasty, critical, negative, blaming, shaming. That person still deserves some respect. They're a person. So work on respect in your relationship. Go back. Okay. Basic steps of conflict resolution. But first, we're going to do guidelines. Guidelines before you actually get to the 10 steps are be respectful and calm. Now, I know that's hard because there's been a conflict and there's a disagreement, but that's within your ability, your capability to stay calm and to stay respectful. Have that motivation to do that. Use your I statements. Practice ahead of time what you want to say. Stay with what you want and what you need. Stay in the present and the future, not the past, where you always did this and you never listened to me in the past. Stay with now. Avoid the absolutes that I was just saying, always and the never. And it's not about who's right and wrong. It's not about right and wrong. It's about trying to solve a problem. It's about understanding. It's about relationship. Can you get through this conflict still with a relationship? Isn't that an important piece? Look at that piece. Okay, now we get to the 10 basic steps. Try to decide on a good time to discuss. Try not to do it when you're angry. Try not to do it when you're really tired. I used to try to talk to my husband at 11 o'clock at night, and he'd have the pillow over his head and say, not now, not now. But I wanted to get it solved now. It isn't always about getting it solved when you want it to. It's about looking at what the other person needs as well. Be open to hear the other person's ideas, even if they're different, even if you think they're stupid. Listen to try to understand and be open. Ask questions if you need to clarify. To be able to say, I don't understand. I'm not sure why you think that way. Please help me understand. Share with I statements. I feel this way. I want this. And if the other person does that too, then it can be really helpful. Give the other person validity for even thinking totally different than you do. They have a right to be validated. Everybody does. And everybody needs to be validated. In other words, I may not understand what you want or need, but I'm trying to give you the respect that that's what you want. Ask for validation for your own ideas. And compromise if you possibly can. Now, sometimes there's no way to compromise. Sometimes it's about maybe deciding where to put the kids in school. Well, they can't go to 2 schools. Or deciding where to live. You can't live in 2 places. And so what can you do to try to work together? To listen, to be kind, to agree to work on a common goal. What is your common goal? Maybe your common goal for the children is we want them to have a good education. We want them to have good teachers. What is your common goal? Maybe in moving, it's we want to live in a high rent district or a low rent district. We want to live in the city. We want to live in the country. What's your common goal? And then be willing to keep yourself accountable. You can't always keep the other person accountable, but you can keep yourself accountable. You might need to revisit this conflict and remember that a conflict is not necessarily a crisis. It's going to be a crisis if it gets to be the blaming and the shaming and the badgering and that's not good. Try to make it constructive, okay? And then how to handle difficult people. Okay, first of all, keep your own cool. Take some deep breaths. Pull out emotionally. Decide to, detach a little bit. Doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you're not going to get all turned inside out. You're just going to be matter of fact, okay? You're just going to state what you want. And you might have to state what you want just over and over. I just want to communicate better. I just want to be able to talk with you once in a while. Okay? And with a difficult person, don't try to win. I tried that before. It doesn't work usually. And if it does, it becomes this major power struggle. And that ends usually in destructive, lots of destructive stuff. And I don't think you want that. So you use lots of coping skills. You breathe, you let go of your own stress. Tell yourself, I can get through this. I'm just going to state what I want. And I usually say, I'm just going to state what I want, short and sweet. I usually say to people, just say one short thing to people and let that be. Don't try to explain. Don't try to keep defending yourself. Just say what you want. Maybe that's all you get a chance to do is one sentence. Then that's okay. You've said your one sentence. If nothing else, use the LEAP method. Listen, empathize, agree on something you can agree on, and try to partner with that person. Let's work together. Let's work together. Remember, you can't make somebody change their mind. You can't. If they don't want to change their mind, they won't. You might be able to influence them, but changing their mind if they don't want to, no. And you can't make somebody else understand how you understand it. You can't, unless they're willing to try to understand it. What you can work on is how you say things. You can work on coping with your own frustration. You can choose to work on you and let the other person work on themselves. I know that's hard because we all want to change the other person. Can't. Be willing to look at that. Okay, so now we're going to have fun with couples and people that are trying to get along together. And so we're going to revisit people A through D that we had in the first session. And we're going to help them kind of work through their stuff. Okay, so Alicia and Bob, they met on the internet and they love doing things outside. They want to settle down. Well, at least Alicia wants to. Bob isn't sure. And so look at how different they are. Very different people, very different characteristics. And we did, in the first session, we did personality profile that helped us to look at these and identify these. So now we're looking at this. And so Alicia, she wants to feel loved. Bob, he wants to feel respected. And let's look at this a little further. So their default talk, Alicia says, you never help me around the house. Bob says, I help you with the dishes and the laundry. Alicia says, all you do is sit around in that garage and drink beer. And Bob says, I spend 1 hour a night in the garage and I only have 2 to 3 beers. She says, why can't we go out more with friends? And he says, well, you want to go out every night. And she says, we need to get a plan around here to divvy up the chores equally because I'm doing everything. And he says, why do we always have to have a plan for everything? So you're noticing, okay, generally Bob is a peacemaker. Alicia generally is kind of controlling. As they kind of ramp up, they get more and more kind of frustrated. Bob gets more defensive. She gets more controlling. And it gets into this attack and defend dynamic, which is really destructive. What if they did this? They use the I statements. And Alicia said, I feel loved if you go out with me. You help me around the house. You do what I say. You help me plan out vacations. And Bob says, I feel respected if you relax at home with me. You let me work in the garage when I want to. You stop telling me what to do, and let's just plan as we go. Different ways of looking at things, okay? Because 2 unique individuals. Hints for communication here. Look at the difference in the statements that we just read. Which are more collaborative? Which make you want to work with the other person more? And do you notice the difference in the tone from the previous slide? Okay, both have taken it down a notch. They're a little calmer. And I encourage people to do some working with statements. So if Alicia said, would you be willing to go out with me 2 nights a week? And Bob, maybe if he said, what if? Notice the what if. It's a question. What if I helped you more with making dinner? Would that help you? And if Alicia said, why don't you want to do things my way? And she asked it just like that. Just, she wants to know. And Bob then is willing to tell her, would you be willing to listen to a few options instead of telling me what to do? That would feel better to me. Okay. So they can work things out as they become more collaborative, more working with statements. Okay, then we have Bob and Bill. Bob's an engineering student. Bill's a music student who loves his saxophone. Notice that they have very much the same characteristics. And they have different needs, except they both have the need to not be alone. They like companionship. Bob, though, has a need to belong. Bill needs to feel respected. Bob specifically has a fear of abandonment, and that causes him to have fear of saying anything. Notice they're both quiet, kind of laid back, but let's see how this kind of pans out. We're going to assume in this scenario that they're brothers and that they're roommates. And they both are patient with each other until they get really frustrated. And they just had it with each other. And then they start yelling and they start blaming and they start name calling. Destructive. Bob and Bill both need to set boundaries for time and space. But for Bob, his fear holds him back, so he's not going to say anything. So Bill is going to speak first. He's been able to sit back and recognize what he needs. And so he says what he needs. I need space. And he's also been pretty intuitive, so he has figured out what Bob needs. You need quiet. You need quiet to study. I need space in order to be able to feel free with my music. And so if Bill says, he's proposing a solution, what if? Notice the what if. That's a proposition. What if I give you Monday, Wednesday, Friday to study and I practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday? How would that be? And Bob says, okay, but what about time together? I don't want to lose relationship with you, Bill. I still want to do things together. How about if we spend some time together on Sundays? And then they agree to do that. They agree to try it. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but they're going to agree to try it. They can always agree to come back together and change it up a little bit, but they're going to agree to try. They're going to try a solution, okay? That's conflict resolution. Good for them. Then we have person Alicia, again, A1, and another person, Anastasia, who has the same characteristics, notice, but a little bit different in their needs. Alicia needs to feel heard and needs to achieve. Anastasia needs to feel appreciated. She's trying to get a job. And let's look at their scenario. Okay, let's pretend they're sisters and they're living at home for the summer. And so Alicia is a high achiever. And Anastasia is kind of a low achiever, at least at the moment. The high achiever says, why don't you just get a job? Just get any job, just so you can have an income. Maybe you'll feel better about yourself. You won't be so crabby around you. And Anastasia needs to be appreciated. She says, just leave me alone. Let me do what I want. However, in trying to solve this, maybe Alicia could cool her jets a little bit, and maybe she could say, instead of being so kind of sarcastic, maybe she could say, I really hope you get a job that you're happy with. Okay, it's totally different, right? That's kind of like working with somebody else, right? And then Anastasia can say, thank you for respecting me. I understand how much you want me to get a job, but I just ask you to be patient with me, respect what I feel I need to do for myself. And that's going to help me to feel better and want to connect with you. You see how you can use these I statements as connecting? That's what it's all about, connecting. And then we've got person C, Cindy, and person D, David. You need to feel loved. Cindy needs to feel loved, and David too needs to feel loved. They both need to feel loved. Hey, they've got a common need. That's good. But they've both got some impulse problems. Cindy tends to be a spender, and David doesn't like that. Cindy is impatient, and David, with his impulsiveness and anger, and he tends to get on porn sites, and that he tends to be a little compulsive with that. She doesn't like that. And he's also disorganized. Okay, so look at their characteristics. Quite different except for the impulsivity. This is a very intense couple. And believe it or not, this is a newly married couple. And I've seen some of these in couples therapy. This is my you need to couple, because they keep saying you need to. So Cindy says, you need to stop yelling. You need to stop doing the porn sites. You need to stop being so disorganized. And David says, you need to stop your spending. You need to stop being so impatient all the time. You need to stop being so uncooperative. You need to, you need to, you need to. It's not a together type of statement, okay? So I will encourage you to get rid of that kind of startup I would encourage you to do what John and Julie Gottman encourage people to do, which is a soft startup, which is quite different than a you need to or you have to statement. It's different. It would be a what if or a this is what I like, this is what I need. That's a softer startup. And so in conflict resolution, first of all, they both need to stop yelling. They need to talk together instead of doing this, the power struggle. And they need to listen to each other to try to understand each other. They're not doing much conversating. They are just talking at each other. Can you hear that? They're talking at each other. Believe it or not, a lot of people do that. It's not helpful. Okay? So, what if Cindy said, she's trying to explain, she's trying to use her I statements. I like to spend because I like nice things. I want our house to be nice. I want to entertain and I want to have lots of fun doing that. So unfortunately, I have expensive tastes. David says, I yell because I want you to listen to me. Calms down and says, I yell because I want you to listen to me. I really need you to listen to me. That sounds different, right? Then I yell because I want you to listen to me. It's all in the tone. I can't tell you how many couples come to me and say, I don't like his tone. I don't like her tone. Okay, work on your tone. They each need to validate. They each need to compromise. And in doing so, what if Cindy says, what about those porn sites that you're on? That doesn't help me to feel loved by you. And he says, I will stop because I want to show you that I love you. It's an I statement. What he's willing to do, it's a boundary that he's willing to set on himself. That feels good to her, and it's actually good for him too. It's good for their marriage. I want you to look at this and say, okay, this looks different than we've been doing. What can I do differently? And now we revisit our couple, a couple people that we've looked at before. Person C, Cindy, and person A. So Cindy and Alicia, they have different needs, need to be heard, need to be respected. Cindy's not very cooperative and she's impatient, but so is Alicia. Okay, look at the way they probably don't work together very well. Okay, let's have two scenarios for them. First of all, they're co-workers, and this is the one we visited in the first webinar. Okay, and so Alicia's the team leader, and Cindy is she feels like a peon working under Alicia because she just tends to brush her off. And because Cindy wants to be heard, she tends to complain all the time. And even more so, Alicia's going to brush her off because she doesn't want to hear the complaints. Okay? And they're both impatient, so it doesn't work too well in their team. In their solution, I list that they both need to be calm, they both need to be patient. Notice it takes two. It really helps if both people work together to work on their own stuff. Okay. Cindy might need to cooperate a little bit more. Alicia might need to be willing to listen to her complaints. Maybe she's got some valid complaints. So Alicia might need to say, I will listen to try to understand what's going on with you. I will sit and I will listen. But then we'll need to try to find a way to work this out. And Cindy might need to say, I'm going to try to cooperate with you. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be great. However, what if Cindy and Alicia are teen and parent? Cindy's the teen who's impulsive, she's not cooperative, she tends to be out after curfew, and she has this friend group that's kind of out there, and the mother doesn't like the friend group, and certainly doesn't like her being out after curfew because she doesn't know what she's doing with her boyfriend. So the mom tends to be more stern and more controlling, she tends to be pushy, and she tends to be demanding. And so how is this child and parent going to try to get along? Well, first of all, they need to talk calmly. They need to try to find a way to agree on something. Maybe their only agreement can be that they want to get along. They want to eventually find a way to get along. And they both need to listen to understand. And they both need to agree to either cooperate. And mom probably needs to stop demanding, because we all know that teenagers don't like demands, right? So mom might need to say, okay, I'm willing to extend your curfew if for the next month you're willing to come in on time. And then mom needs to be true to that and let Cindy earn her time. Okay. But then Cindy needs to be true to what she's agreeing to. I'm going to cooperate with you, Mom, because I want to get along with you. I don't want to fight all the time. Okay. But wouldn't it be wonderful if teenagers and parents got along all the time? This is what it takes. It takes both people. It takes parents being willing to do their part, and it also takes teenagers being willing to do their part. This is how it works. Well, okay. And so here we are, we're at the end of our time. We have done a lot of work today. We've done talk on constructive, destructive communication, boundary issues, listening and responding, respectful assertiveness, conflict resolution, dealing with difficult people, and helping people solve their problems. Very important. I'm hoping that you have learned something positive from this, and that you can take this into your relationships, whether it be with another person, another friend, a sibling, a parent, a child, somebody that you can interact with a little bit better because you've learned a little bit more of the tools that you can use. Thank you for sharing with me today. Thank you for coming today, and take care, please, and be well. Thank you.